Well, hello and welcome. Thanks for joining us for this week's panel conversation, where we're going to be hearing from leaders in law enforcement about how community perspectives impact on the delivery of police services in their communities. My name is Matt Fulton. I'm the Vice President for National Engagement for a company called Polco. Polco works with communities around building engagement and helping to track performance. And given the current disruptive environment that we're in, we believe that engagement is a really important aspect in the delivery of police services and all governmental services for that matter. And so we have developed this series of panel conversations so that you can hear from leaders in local law enforcement, excuse me, about how resident input does impact on the delivery of police services. We've got an excellent panel today, and I'm really excited about getting into the conversation. The whole idea is that we hope that you can take away a new perspective, a new idea, something that will work in your communities as you're meeting today's challenges in law enforcement. Here's the way the day will go. I'll do a quick introduction of our panelists, and then we will get into the actual questioning process. We have 3 questions that we'll be posing to each of these leaders today. And then we will follow it up with any kind of conversation or additional comments from any of the panelists that they might want to share. And then we will wrap it up. It generally takes about an hour, and we're just excited about putting this recording together for you to benefit from. So let me go ahead and make some introductions. Our first panelist is David Boggs, who fairly recently retired as the police chief in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. David has spent 27 years in law enforcement and is currently coaching and training public sector leaders around the country. He's also the founder and CEO of First Line Social, which is a cloud-based application that allows full employee engagement and provides enhanced connectivity in all sectors and level of government to their communities while keeping public information offices in complete control of the agency. Dave has a master's degree and is a graduate of the FBI Academy and was selected as an executive teaching fellow for the FBI. He remains very engaged in the law enforcement profession, including the FBI LEADA program, the Oklahoma National Academy, and the International Chiefs of Police Association. He's also a director with Guardian Alliance Technologies, which Polco is proud to say is a current partner with. So David, thank you for being with us. And would you mind just adding a little bit of color to your background?
Sure. No, thanks for the opportunity to be here. I really appreciate it. I've been blessed, gotten to move around and do quite a few things through the course of my career, like most of the professionals on this panel. And so it's given me a chance, I think, to see law enforcement all over this beautiful nation of ours and get to engage with a lot of officers from all tiers. And things are going really, really in a positive direction, I think. We're making some great changes in law enforcement and looking forward to the future. So I'm excited to be here.
Well, given that you've had such a broad range of experiences during your career and with all your leadership, I'm really excited to hear about your perspectives and your thoughts for the questions today. So thanks a lot for being here.
Thank you.
Let me introduce Chief Shannon Seals, who's the chief of police in Carbondale, Kansas. She takes great pride in reaching out to her community that she serves and is proud to serve in her current position as police chief. After getting her degree in criminal justice and law enforcement, she worked with a security company for a while before taking time off to raise 5 children. Then she re-entered the workforce with Shawnee County, Kansas, and worked for a children's psychiatric treatment facility. She's worked for smaller police jurisdictions and joined the Carbondale police force in 2016 and assumed the chief's position last year. Shannon, thank you for joining us and would love to learn a little bit more about you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I kind of feel a little intimidated by people on either side of me, but I'm here to just share what I do know, which is about small town policing and, all of the blessing that I've gotten from learning from, the classes and the training that I have taken. So I'm here to talk about what I do know and enjoy learning from what you guys know.
Shannon, there are some universal rules in local government and in law enforcement. It doesn't really matter about the size of the jurisdiction. Right. The responsibilities that you have as police chief remain the same. It's really helping to build community, and so I'm very appreciative that you're participating in the panel conversation.
Thank you.
And look forward to hearing your responses.
Thank you so much.
I'm happy to introduce David Wolf, who's the chief of police of the CALEA accredited Olivette Police Department in Olivette, Missouri. Dave started his law enforcement career back in 1982 with the Chesterfield, Missouri Police Department, and has been with Olivette since 2001, so a nice tenure in that community. Dave's career includes a wide array of responsible positions and responsibilities relating to the CALEA accreditation process and serving on a variety of executive boards in the St. Louis area. The ones that he noted include the Executive Board of Law Enforcement Officials of Greater St. Louis, the Executive Board and FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force for St. Louis. He also serves as an adjunct professor for the St. Louis Community College. Dave's got a bachelor's degree in law enforcement and a master's degree in public administration. He's also a graduate of the FBI National Academy and has completed the FBI Gateway Law Enforcement Executive Development Seminar. Chief Wolf, thank you so much for joining, and would really welcome you to add a little bit of color onto your background.
Thank you, Matt. And like David said, I really welcome the opportunity to be here. I think these types of things are vital to not only law enforcement, but as you mentioned, Matt, to all government agencies. And I think that David touched on something about being able to be around, go around the country and meet people from various places. And that's one of the reasons why I'm involved in the CALEA process as a team leader, doing CALEA assessments all around the country. It's a great opportunity to travel to various size departments to see, what they're doing right, what their successes are, what their shortcomings may be. And I can tell you that on every one of the on-sites that I do, typically we bring something back to our own agencies because, as you mentioned, Matt, the size of the agency really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you're NYPD with 36,000 officers or a smaller rural agency. Policing is global, right? I mean, if something happens in Shannon's jurisdiction or something happens in my jurisdiction or something happens in NYPD, people in your community want to know, hey, how's my PD going to respond to that? And it really doesn't matter the size, because at the end of the day, I bet you I could look at my pursuit policy, my use of force policy, and I bet you that it's very similar to Shannon's policy. I bet you it's very similar to NYPD's policy. At the end of the day, we all do the same thing. And so I couldn't agree with some of your comments more. And again, just it's great to be here. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks, Chief Wolf. And congratulations on your leadership in the CALEA process. We've been, because I'm in the engagement world, we do work around communities that are accredited, and our tools have been kind of modeled around the requirements for CALEA. And the more I learn about that program, and of course I've been around it during the course of my career, it just says a lot with leaders like you that are helping communities and jurisdictions and organizations get the accreditation that they need so that they can, stand behind the work that they've done and the policies that they have in the jurisdiction. So thanks for your work in that area.
Thank you.
So let's kick into the conversation a little bit. The topic we're exploring today is putting police needs and expectations into a community context. I was a city manager for over 30 years in the Minneapolis-St. Paul Twin Cities area. And I got to say, public safety plays such an important role. It impacts every aspect of a community's overall success and quality of life, not just public safety. It really does provide that backbone of quality in a community so that residents and businesses and other stakeholders are willing to invest in the community. And so I have just great respect and admiration for the work that law enforcement agencies do in communities around the country. And the expectations are really high on your departments. The reality is that if the mistake is made in law enforcement, those kinds of things have generational impacts. I'm in the Twin Cities. You're certainly seeing it occur in my area, a neighborhood. And so the role and work that you do has huge consequences for the community. And you're challenged every day, overlapping, challenging, complex kind of issues that always are evolving and have to be handled professionally, respectfully, and responded to in an appropriate manner. So the role that you are spending and playing in law enforcement and in public safety in the communities has huge implications for communities around the country. As I mentioned, I work for Polco, and we do a lot of work around engagement and around performance. And we actually have developed a tool. It's called the National Police Services Survey, NPSS. And the intent of this survey is really designed to help communities get their arms around what is a community perspective around police services that are going on in the community. We developed it back in 2016, and we actually did 2 administrations of the survey nationally back in 2018. And then given all the things that have happened over the last couple of years, we did another national administration this past year. And the graph that I am sharing with you really is talking about the shifts in resident priorities over the course of the difference between those 2 years. It's really kind of interesting, the changes and the shifts in resident trust and resident perspectives in police services. But the one area, or the 2 areas, I guess, where the priorities have actually increased relate to those areas where police and community come together, where you develop those partnerships about community problem solving and working together on some of the issues that are impacting on the community. And I find that really interesting, just given kind of the disruptive environment that we're in and the difficulties generally of engaging with the community. You know, engagement has always been difficult. And then you lay on top of that the pandemic. It just creates all sorts of additional challenges and barriers to doing engagement. And so it doesn't take away from the importance of engaging with your residents. It just means that you have to be creative and find different ways to engage. And you know that the resident priorities now are really wanting to engage more with police departments so that you can work together on addressing the issues that are impacting communities and neighborhoods across the country. And so the conversation today is really designed about getting a better sense for how are you doing that, and what are you finding successful in accomplishing that engagement. So there's 3 questions that we want to pose today. The first question is, what role should the community play in guiding or influencing the delivery of police services? The second is, what strategies are you using for managing community expectations? And the final one is, what tools and methods do you find successful to help understand resident expectations and priorities regarding the delivery of police services? So with that, I'd like to kind of kick into the first question. And if you wouldn't mind, Chief Boggs, I want to start with you. Can you talk about the role that you feel a community should play in guiding or influencing the delivery of police services? I'm thinking of back in Broken Arrow, but even in your current work?
Yeah, it's really a very solid question, and it kind of kicks off a lot of leadership discussions that I get to take part in all around the country. It's, you know, if you look at America, the way we're constructed, we have 18,000 law enforcement agencies. And I think we have that for a very specific reason. I think our society appreciates governance at the local level. And that gets discussed everywhere I go, kind of regardless of context. You know, if you compare us to our European partners, many of them would have one police force for an entire country. And we look at that very differently here in the United States. And I think that's a positive thing. I also kind of get the flavor that, you know, our societies really appreciate their local law enforcement. They see us, they understand us, they feel as though that we're enforcing the law the way they want it enforced. And, you know, that's extremely important, because what you're really trying to accomplish is, if you've got a neighborhood that's worried about traffic enforcement, that's their biggest problem. And that's what we should be addressing. And if you've got another neighborhood that it's fear of crime, and that's their biggest problem, then that's what we should be addressing, even neighborhood by neighborhood, not just by community. So I think the specificity that allows our community to tell us what they want is actually foundational for kind of how we do business in the U.S.
David, have you found, just in your kind of work during the past year,
Carbondale,
you concur on the priority levels and the relationship that organizations have had with communities? The priority that I shared a little bit earlier on, the changing priorities on doing that community neighborhood building. Are you seeing that, or have you seen that over the course of the last year?
I get that and get back to
I really have. I think outreach is incredibly important right now. Your comment that the pandemic has made that more complicated is accurate, but it certainly doesn't take away from the fact
I'll
that.
get to you. Thank you.
Oops, sorry. Go ahead.
No, we're good. It certainly doesn't take away from the fact that, you know, that's law enforcement's job, is to make sure that they're listening to the citizens that they serve. And I think the more struggles that we have, the more complex our societal situation becomes, like the pandemic. I think people want that sense of reassurance in local government, because that's That's who really has their loudest voice.
Yep. Thank you. Chief Seals, can you talk about what the role is that community should play in guiding and influencing the delivery of police services in Carbondale?
So we try to keep our finger on the pulse and find out what is most important to everyone in our community while maintaining the law, while maintaining order. And sometimes that's thrown off a little bit because people don't always understand exactly what the law is. And so from that, you go to education. And so if you could have people educated, then they can certainly, provide a larger role in guiding and influencing police services. But we're always listening. We're always trying to find out what it is that would be of service to the people in our community.
Shannon, did you find much of a change in the level of engagement during this last year? Just kind of given the disruptive environment and the pandemic issues. Any thoughts about that?
It's been different because we actually were pretty close to our capital, which is Topeka. We have lots of people travel through. And so some of the negativity that I've seen, I believe is come from other places. Our core people here in town, we're a bedroom community. They all seem to support us and stand behind us. But we have seen some of the negativity. We have seen some of the backlash of the things that are going on in larger whole nation.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. And the role that the local community plays in the delivery of police services, how do they generally get engaged right now?
We are out on the street. I'm out on the street. It's in a very personal way. It's also in social media. We recently started getting more involved with social media because previously it was misused. So we've gotten our toe back into the water on that situation in that area. And I keep putting out more information, and I think people appreciate that. So personal contact every day, and then social media is we're finding very helpful.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Chief Wolf, can you talk about the role that the community plays in the delivery of police services in Olivette?
Yeah, I think it's like Chief Boggs said. I mean, it's extremely important. I mean, the public are our constituents, right? So these are the people that we have to be listening to and really hearing and really listening to what they're requesting and what their concerns are. But I think it's vital. I think it's extremely important to find out what it is, what their expectations are, and what they think we need to be doing. And like Chief Boggs said, it's going to vary from neighborhood to neighborhood. And part of the challenge certainly is developing the relationships and developing the programs so that we can deal with problem A in this neighborhood and problem B in that neighborhood. But it's vital that we listen to them. And I think one of the things Chief Boggs alluded to, which I think is right on the money, is how valuable and how great local government is. Because I have a city manager who is she's really a tremendous leader. And one of the things that she says about local government is that it's really about the relationships and the community. It's not about left or right. It's not about which side of the aisle you're on. Exactly. It's really about making those connections and making those relationships. And I think that's very important.
Yeah, I think that's a really solid point. Have you noticed at all during the last year in this kind of virtual world that we're still in? Did you see much of a shift in the levels of engagement with your residents?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, to some extent. I mean, obviously, one of the things that some of our in-person programs, we obviously weren't doing. We do have the ability to take concerns and things like that over, from our website and whatnot. But obviously, certainly the in-person events just weren't happening. And so I think that's unfortunate. We did continue to do some of those things virtually, and coffee with the mayor, coffee with a cop. We continue to do those virtually, but certainly, there's some definite drawbacks to the virtual environment, right? I think you do lose a lot of that energy. You lose. There's a lot to be lost by doing things virtually. However, that being said, it does create a lot of convenience for people. And so, at times where I thought some of our attendance would be low on virtual things, it was actually higher because, people could sit at home in their pajamas and they didn't have to get, all dressed up or whatever to come to a meeting. So certainly good and bad, but definitely, I think it took a toll on everybody.
Did you notice, through our research, we've actually realized that the emotional impact of the pandemic had a lot of impacts on the community in terms of just their reliance on certain things that local government provides, but also the shift in maybe the responses that your department had to make. Can you talk a little bit about what that experience was like in your community?
So, the St. Louis law enforcement community is pretty unique. Within one county, within St. Louis County, we have almost 90 municipalities and over 70 police departments. And so a lot of the police departments, even when you look, like Chief Boggs mentioned, 18,000 law enforcement agencies across the country, the vast majority of those are 50 employees or less. My agency, including me, is 23 sworn officers. But we have, as I said, we have dozens of police departments around us. And so while we are in a very strong, large law enforcement environment in St. Louis County, within Olivette, my jurisdiction is almost 3 square miles, which is very small. But it's one of, if not the most diverse communities within the St. Louis County area. And so we've always placed a lot of emphasis on those relationships and that community building and things like that. So we didn't typically take reports over the phone. On every ambulance call that goes out, an officer responds and typically goes in the house. And if they can be of assistance to the paramedics, then we would do that. During the pandemic, we scaled back those operations a lot. So we did start taking reports over the phone, depending upon the seriousness of the call. We did have officers waiting in their cars instead of going inside the homes on medical calls, just because it wasn't worth the potential risk or exposure. So we did see some scaling back of those operations. And I think, like you said, Matt, it really did take a toll on the officers' morale, just in general. I think that certainly as you alluded to in the beginning of the call, we've been in a very disruptive environment. The climate, as everybody is well aware of, for law enforcement is not the best right now. And so we're dealing with that. And then we're also dealing with the pandemic and not as much personal contact. And I'm glad that we're starting to introduce in-person things again.
Yeah, that's very well stated. And thanks for just kind of sharing that experience of what it was like to be in the law enforcement world over the past year, because you're needing to adapt to all sorts of changing conditions in the community. And just given the role that you're playing is such a critical thing to be attentive to. So let's move on to the second question. And Chief Seals, I wanted to start with you, but as a precursor to the question, I've had conversations with police chiefs that have talked about understanding what residents' needs are and where their priorities are, but it becomes just as important to be able to figure out ways to actually manage those expectations. And so that's what I want to explore with the second question is, how do you go about managing what the residents want and businesses want in order to be able to deliver the police services in a way that recognizes limitations, recognizes resource limitations, those kinds of things. And so Chief Seals, can you talk about the strategies that you're using for managing community expectations in Carbondale?
Yes, it still goes back to just having those one-on-one conversations. We're able to, and on the phone and through media, but having the conversations where we educate. We are not even a 24-hour agency. We eventually would like to be. Our city's trying to grow a little bit, and our government is changing right now. But so our goal when we talk to someone is to educate them. Yeah, this is what our limitations are. We're on these hours. There may be a few gaps, and so then we fill in with the county sheriff's department, and they're able to help us out, which we're very blessed to have them help us out. We present the human side of policing to each person that we talk to. We educate them. We build a relationship with them. When I originally got here as a police officer, I actually went to every other house over the course of a year and met with the person in that house or people in the house to have a positive interaction with them, because often we have negative interactions and that's the only interactions we get. But it was my goal to try and meet every other house in the city, and I was able to do that. And so I've actually built quite a few great relationships. The other big thing is if you say you're going to do something, you need to do it. And so follow through is huge. Sometimes what people need is just for you to go see what they're having an issue with. Talk to them about, that's a problem. So let's see how we can solve that together. So that's how we go about it, is that approach.
In a smaller jurisdiction, first of all, congratulations on that really great work on going out and building that relationship, because you're right, that is such an important role, and it just kind of demonstrates your commitment to the profession. And then given your size of the jurisdiction, that relationship with the county becomes such an important aspect too, doesn't it? Yeah. Have you found good alignment with the county in terms of messaging around expectations?
Recently, we have. We just got a new sheriff for the county, and we're actually all aligning with other chiefs in the area. There's not been a relationship with law enforcement, and so in the last 6 months, we've put together chiefs meetings with the sheriff included, and so we are all starting to really work together very well.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Chief Wolf, can you talk about the strategies that you're using in Olivette for helping to manage resident expectations?
Yeah, and I think a lot of these answers they're gonna echo each other, right? Because as we talked about earlier, bottom line, we all do the same thing. Doesn't really matter where you are, and so like Chief Seals alluded to, the relationship building is very important. One of the things that we are going to institute this year is a resident survey to find out, not only how they rate our level of service, but also, of course, their expectations, their concerns, their compliments, their, all kinds of stuff that we can glean from a survey. We did a survey. There was actually a neighborhood group, a community group that formed after the Michael Brown shooting in Ferguson in 2014. And there was a community group that actually got together and did a community survey. We are fortunate enough that we are in a community that is very supportive of us and the city government. And so the survey was very positive, but we haven't done one since. And so one of the things that I definitely want to do is institute a survey. And then again, I think Chief Seals already mentioned education. That education piece is so important, because I think as much as we hear that some of the responsibilities that people call the police for aren't really the responsibility of the police, the reality of it is when people are having a bad day and when they're in their worst moment, that's who they call. And it doesn't matter it doesn't matter what the problem is, and it doesn't matter what we think of the problem. To them, it's their worst moment, or it's, their headache, or it's their frustration. If it's whether it's a violent crime or a misdemeanor or a neighbor dispute, we're the ones they call. And so while of course we respond as we would, it doesn't matter what the call is, we respond in the same manner. I think that education piece is very important, so that they know that, for a variety of reasons. First of all, if we can't provide the solution to the problem, we need to be able to provide to them at least the resources or point them in that right direction so they can get their problem solved. And obviously that's very important. And then, should the problem arise in the future, then they have that information already, so that they don't necessarily have to call us and slow down that solution process. They can go to wherever it is they need to go.
That's very well stated. The interesting thing about, based on my experience, every department that a local government has, in one way or another, has a relationship with public safety. If our streets are in bad shape, you're going to have more automobile accidents. If buildings aren't maintained the way that they're supposed to be maintained, you're going to have issues relating to the structure that'll involve your department. So I really appreciate that. And the educational part of what you're saying really is around the whole issue of helping the residents develop a context for what the local government does, and specifically law enforcement in supporting that role. And so it's a very, very well stated perspective on just how your department serves so many different functions and services that a local community pertains to or delivers. Does your community do National Night Out and those kinds of annual events?
We do, and so National Night Out typically is in August. Yep. Several years ago, and certainly this is not unique to Olivette, but we do now Olivette Night Out, and we typically would do it in June, just because it was a little bit cooler in St. Louis in June than in August. Obviously, with the pandemic, it was unfortunately canceled last year. This year, we're actually looking to do it in the fall, which I'm very excited about, because I'm hoping that. First of all, I hope that the numbers are up because of, people and just feeling better about what's going on in the world. But certainly the weather does play a big part. And so we do get involved in that. Like I said, Coffee with a Cop was something that we started a couple of years ago that we did for about a year, and then it kind of got messed up because of COVID. But those are the types of things that certainly we look forward to and we appreciate being involved in. Yeah, as do the other city departments. Yeah,
and we'll come back to learning a little bit more about those in the next question. The interesting thing during National Night Outs that I can recall is so many of the conversations, they had nothing to do with public safety. It had to do with other things related to quality of life in the community. Is that your experience?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you for your response. Thanks.
Sure.
Chief Boggs, can you talk about the strategies that you used in Broken Arrow and other aspects of how you go about managing resident perspectives and resident priorities?
Yeah, Chief Seals and Chief Wolf have done a great job, and I don't want to be overly redundant, right? Because we all do a lot of those same mechanisms when it comes to community outreach, listening to our citizens, trying to get a finger on the pulse. It's been interesting over the course of a career, though, to look at this kind of continuing escalation of the ability to be reachable by the citizens that we serve, right? Because initially, law enforcement seemed like we just responded to calls for service some 30 years ago when I got into this business. And that was the bulk of what we did, was handle the citizen problem at the point of contact. And then we moved into, we did surveys, like Chief Wolf, coming from a CALEA accredited agency, reaching out and asking the citizens what they're looking for. Social media has changed that yet again, because now we've got an obligation to kind of monitor social media and hear from the inputs of our communities across different platforms. And I think Chief Seals, she did a great job of talking about this relationship issue is really underpinned by the idea that people want to be heard, right? And local government's job is not just to solve their problem, but to make sure they walk away feeling like they were heard. And, that works for us kind of across the board. So whether it's coffee with a cop or coffee with the mayor or coffee with the chief or monitoring social media, regardless of which kind of vertical we use to listen to our communities, I think the big thing is we're starting to actually be very responsive to the fact that, hey, we heard you. And if you want a little more traffic enforcement when school lets out, you're going to see us out there, and we're going to do our best to kind of touch that and make sure that we, address that problem as best we can for you. Maybe not be there every day, but we're going to work on that for you. And we'll walk our way through the different areas of our community and try to provide solutions, because I think making sure that people feel like they're heard is really a big deal now for local government. We're not, as citizens, I think our communities are getting somewhat frustrated that it's harder to feel heard at the larger tiers of government, whether that's federal government or state government. And we have a deep reliance that local government's going to listen. And it's kind of how all this plays out for me.
Yeah, that is interesting. Our research has shown that trust in local government has actually increased during the last year, especially when you do it relative to state and federal. And it really, I think, just kind of reflects how local governments have stepped up. They've made sure that those connections have been authentic and have been consistently applied and paying attention to what those needs are. I'd be curious, David, in the work that you're doing right now, are you seeing any technology or applications of technology that helps to get to this point of managing resident expectations or priorities, or just getting a better handle in a different way on helping residents to develop that context and that connection with their local governments?
So I do see us using a lot of social media tools. That's becoming an increasing point, because when I moved back 25 or 30 years ago, 10 to 20 people kind of ran every city, regardless of the size of the city. And that wasn't always necessarily your elected officials. It could be people that were very active in the community, right? People that had a loud voice, people that had folks' ear that got things done within government. And social media has leveled that playing field. Now somebody with 500 followers in a neighborhood that's upset over, a traffic issue can have just as loud of a voice as, a more affluent or more politically connected member of the community. And that's good. But it's opened up an opportunity for us to use a lot of things so that we can, listen to people. And definitely the social media tools are becoming very active. I think surveys, to Polko's point, are becoming increasingly utilized, because it lets people reach out, have a voice, and make sure that somebody is benchmarking those changing expectations, because communities are migrating really quickly. Our demographics are changing much faster than they did in the past. People are more mobile now. And so I think all these things tie together and make for a better impact.
Yeah, thanks for that. I agree. These conversations are not designed to promote Polko or the work
Sure.
that we do, but I can say that communities that need to understand where communities' perspectives are in order to really understand where the values are, especially if you're trying to implement change. Try to implement change when you don't have a good sense where your community residents lie. It almost becomes an impossible battle to take on. And so having mechanisms or ways to actually reach out and touch and understand where those priorities are becomes a really important factor. And data is becoming such a more important part of our entire world and how we go about getting that information. So thanks for that. Thanks for your insights on that. I really appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Let's move on to the third question. And Chief Wolf, I'd like to start with you. Can you talk about the tools and methods that you're using right now to understand resident expectations and priorities as you deliver police services?
So we've done quite a bit, I think, in this arena over the last couple of years. And if I could just real quickly comment on Chief Boggs' comment about being heard, and again, obviously very important. And I think one of the important takeaways from that is that we may not always have the solution. The resident may not necessarily achieve their desired outcome, but the fact that they do have a person that they can at least vent to or hear their problem and get some insight, even if it is not the answer that they were looking for. Certainly we all know that just just listen to me for a second, and just getting that information out there, or being able to vent that is so huge. And so while the outcome isn't necessarily always what they look for, such a large portion of that is just being heard. And so I think that's a really important comment. So back to the question, Matt. So I think we've done a lot in this arena over the last couple of years. My agency never had a community engagement officer. And so one of the things that I did was I assigned somebody to that position. He is doing a tremendous job. Unfortunately, he was assigned to that position right at the start of the pandemic. So a lot of stuff that we had talked about doing has been put on hold, but it's starting to ramp up again. We talked about the survey to understand what our residents want. I like you, Matt. I applaud Chief Seals for your dedication on getting out and meeting those residents. Our fiscal year starts July 1st, and so a lot of these changes we do around our fiscal year. And so one of the things that we're putting into that we're instituting is that each officer will make 2 citizen contacts or 2 community contacts per shift. That doesn't include calls for service or traffic stops, and that doesn't include when you go into the gas station to get a soda. These have to be 2 self-initiated community contacts per shift, time allowing. And that's the things you see them on social media. Officers that are getting out and playing catch with somebody in the yard, or kids are out on their skateboard, getting out and talking to them, going into the businesses just to say hello, and going as far as Chief Seals went, and whatever neighborhood it is that you're patrolling, going up to a house and just introducing yourself and having those conversations and really building those personal relationships. So that's something that we're doing. Something that we did last fall, we held 2 different listening sessions with African-American residents of Olivette. And so the first one was in September. We had 17 African-American adults that live in Olivette. I would say that the average age was probably 45, 50 years old. And so we had a listening session with them to really hear their thoughts on the police department, our successes, our shortcomings, their concerns. What are they looking for? What are their expectations? And so we held that in September. And then a few months later, we had another listening session with African-American youths that were, average age 20, 22. Obviously some differences in opinion. Not all of them were from Olivette, just because we kind of looked more at the school district and bringing, just some surrounding opinions in. And so we had those 2 listening sessions that were really, really beneficial. One of the things that I set up was what I call the CCRT, or the Chiefs Community Resource Team. And this is we meet monthly, and it's a team of professionals from various disciplines who meet to discuss how their disciplines intersect with law enforcement, and what can I do as a chief to examine those disciplines and look at strategies for the police department and how we're doing things, and policies and procedures and practices. They don't have any sort of authority to make policy or anything like that, but they're a sounding board for me. And like I said, it's about 12 individuals. There's somebody from the St. Louis County Prosecuting Attorney's Office that attends. There's somebody with domestic violence. There's somebody with drug education. There is a mental health representative. There is a member of the Missouri House of Representatives that sits on that panel. The director of student services for the Ladue School District, which is the district that services Olivette, is on there. I also have a couple African-American residents, just to get the resident input. Somebody from the Anti-Defamation League sits on that team. And we've met now since October, and it has been just a wealth of information, and it's been a great sounding board for me when I'm looking at, anything from, hey, we're thinking about this for the budget. What's kind of a outside of law enforcement perspective on this item to, we've talked about certainly bias-based policing and traffic stops and things like that and policies. And it's been, I think I rambled a little bit much for you, but those things have been very valuable for us.
I'm really happy that you shared that. The CCRT, what a great way to get input from the community. So congratulations on that. I mean, I think that the listening sessions, just simply the accreditation, I think, helps your residents to have confidence that their law enforcement agency is working in a professional manner and meeting those expectations that are kind of universally accepted. So
sure.
Congratulations on all of that work. Those are really creative things. And that's honestly some of those kind of new and creative ideas that we want to share with others that can benefit from that insight. So thanks so much for that.
Thank you.
Chief Boggs, can you talk about the tools and methods that you find successful in helping to understand resident expectations and priorities?
I'm more of a direct approach person. So for me, going out and meeting with people individually, I think is really, really important. I like sitting with people one-on-one or in small groups because I think it gives folks the chance to open up and actually be heard. And that's kind of foundational for me. And so that's probably my number one technique right there, is just talking to people individually.
Have you found when you were chief in Broken Arrow, what were the most successful ways programs that you had in place for helping to get resident input and just to get your arms around in a sense for how you're doing?
Sure. So our Citizens Police Academy was wildly popular in our jurisdiction, and I would go in, specific nights, but sometimes just unannounced, and have, conversations with the folks who participated, give them a chance to ask me anything they wanted. I would invite in our ministers from our community, and same thing, just an open listening and conversation session for, 30 minutes to a couple of hours, depending on what their needs and concerns were. We did that after the riots in St. Louis, just so that we could, have a clear understanding of what our citizens needed and expected. And then, they gave them a chance to get feedback about the things that they could expect from us as their law enforcement agency. I think having employees on community panels are exceptionally important, whether that's Lions Club, Rotary, and it's not just the chief's job to reach out and touch the citizens. I think that distributed leadership model now is really the way forward, where as many people in our organization as possible need to understand their responsibility to really be engaged with their community, not just live in it, but actually be engaged with it and be open to the fact that we don't have all the answers, and, we'll make micro adjustments as we move this thing along, because that's what makes everybody successful. Makes us successful in our personal relationships, just like it does in our professional relationships.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. That distributed leadership, I think, is a really valid one. And the other nice thing that I'm hearing from you is how you engage with your community partners. Chief Wolf talked about that as well, but just using the talents and resources that are already in the community to help you do a better job in the work that you're doing. Sounds like you did that in Broken Arrow, and I'm sure you're doing that with your leadership roles right now in law enforcement, and just working and helping communities to do a better job and building that trust factor that everybody needs to rely upon, right?
I think so. And I see that in every community that I get the chance to go be a part of for just a week or so in training, because your citizens know what resources are available. And our job is just to open that door. And, like both other chiefs have said, it's not our job to solve every problem. It's our job to hear the citizen and try to connect them with the right resource. And so if we're all working to do that, we can't solve every problem they have.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. Chief Seals, can you talk about the tools and methods that you're using to understand resident expectations and priorities in Carbondale?
Well, it's basically the same thing. Thank you, both of you, Chief Boggs and Chief Wolf, because you guys are, reiterating stuff that we actually do on our smaller scale. And in person is my favorite. I actually had that written down before the meeting. But in person is to me is the best. That's what kind of a person I am. I want to go out and have that contact and have that personal kind of relationship. Social media is again working well. And then our city government. And all right now, we're all in a huge transition. And so we're trying new things. And I've learned a lot here from both of the other chiefs, some things that I want to try. We've done neighborhood watches, and there's been a great buy-in for that. The challenge, of course, was trying to work on that still with COVID, and so it kind of has gone by the wayside. But I'm looking forward to reviving that, and maybe even using, some more digital, electronic ways of getting meetings together for our community. But I do appreciate what both of you said. The Chiefs Community Resource Team sounds wonderful. I've already thought of several people that I would want to reach out to start, working on something like that. So thank you. I appreciate that. In the listening sessions, I actually have not ever experienced anything like that, but I think setting something up like that and doing maybe looking for resources and a survey would be a good thing for our community. So I appreciate it. But yeah, so in person, social media, and using our city government to a positive benefit would be what we do.
Well, as you start to implement your social media, I'm sure that you'll find many more ways to engage with your residents and to get their input and to kind of help inform and guide the work that you're doing. So thank you for that. This has been great. I've really enjoyed this conversation. Do any of you have any questions or additional comments that you'd like to share with anybody?
The only thing, Matt, that I just wanted to respond to Chief Boggs' comment about the micro changes to programs, and I think that again is very important, and it's great that we're all on this call and that we're all certainly we all have the same mindset. And again, it doesn't matter how big your agency is or what types of calls you respond to more often than not. I think we all do have the same mindset, but I think that comment about the micro changes is so important because it's totally dynamic. It's totally fluid, the environment that we're in. Certainly you can't, especially, in today's environment, you can't think that the policy that you implement today, it may change tomorrow, literally. In 24 hours, something may happen. New legislation may pass, or who knows. And so I think that it's very important to keep that open-mindedness that we're going to make these changes constantly, because our field is changing constantly.
Yeah. Any responses or thoughts to that?
I'd love to. Oh, go ahead, Shannon.
Oh, I was just going to say, you have to stay on your toes. Things are constantly changing, even in our little area. And you gotta stay up on what's going on. So absolutely.
Yep. My last thought was just going to be, I think like with everything, the strength is also kind of our competing weakness, right? The strength of the ability to have so much information coming at us at once, so whether it's social media or other technological advances, also creates for the leader this need to make sure that we discern noise from data and fact. And we will just have to continue to work at that as leaders and make sure that we're hearing the good things, the factual things. Obviously, even responding to emotion can be a good thing as long as we're trying to move things forward for everybody. But, the fact-based law enforcement leadership now, compiling data, trying to figure out strategy, where our organizations need to go next is what's going to take us positively into the future. And I find that communities really do trust us. They love their law enforcement. They really, really do. Everywhere I go, people are still buying law enforcement officers' lunches and, dropping off cookies at the PDs. And so we're doing some great work out there. We've got adjustments we need to make, and we need to be sure that we're quick to admit when we're wrong. But we've got a lot of good stuff happening. It's a fun time to be part of it.
Yeah. Really appreciate that added perspective on that topic. And I hear more and more from people during these conversations about the question about what is the truth and how do you get through the noise. So Chief Wolf, as you start thinking about the survey, we kind of work on the premise of the wisdom of the crowd. so many things in local government are guided by only a handful of voices. But if you can get the wisdom of your community to help you understand where those real priorities are, it really becomes a mechanism for allowing you to get a truer sense and a truer understanding as to where you really need to be spending your time. So thanks for that added thought. Let me do this. This has been a great conversation. I love the perspectives and the ideas that all of you shared, that direct interaction and that direct connection, the relationship building, and making sure that you're having regular contact with residents and stakeholders came through very clear way for building relationships. But you also recognize the value of technology and using, especially during this last year, kind of the social media, the data-driven kind of mechanisms that are important for helping you to align. So thanks for all of those thoughts. I'm really impressed by the work that all of you are doing in your roles in law enforcement, regardless of jurisdictional size. Shannon, you bring a really unique flavor to this conversation, and congratulations on all the work that you're doing in building your department and building those relationships with the county for the delivery of services. I think that's really a critical role. And, the majority of communities in the world are smaller jurisdictions. And so really appreciate having your perspective today. Chief Wolf, I want to compliment you on the work that you're doing. Your involvement with CALEA and getting that accreditation in your department and really demonstrating excellence in the work that you're doing, I think says a lot for you as a leader, as well as a lot for the community generally. So thank you for those thoughts. Let me just kind of wrap this up. I will follow up this conversation with getting you information and connection information for each other, so that if you want to follow up with each other, you'll be welcome to do that. I do these conversations every week, and so I would welcome you to suggest some names or other leaders in law enforcement who might do a good job and help continue this conversation on. You'll start to see your highlight segments on LinkedIn probably within a week, and we certainly want and would invite you to share that with your networks as well. We want to make sure that people who trust your opinion are hearing your perspectives and learning from you as well. So thanks for doing that. I'll connect with you probably over the next several days. I'd love to get any feedback that you have on this program. Always want to figure out a way to do this better, and your perspectives and ideas on how we can enhance this delivery would be very, very helpful. So thanks for that. Let me just kind of wrap it up by thanking you again for being part of it. The best part for me is I get to meet 3 new people every week, and these conversations are really worthwhile for me. I've learned a ton. And gained immensely on the work that law enforcement is doing. And there's a lot of creativity and adaptive approaches to dealing with this engagement topic. And all of you endorse that for sure. So thank you. I'll look forward to connecting with you. Really appreciate the time you spent.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Matt.
Great to meet you guys.
Nice meeting all of you as well.
Good to see you again,
Absolutely.
Shannon.
Good to see you too, David. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.